queers, and welcome back to Lit for Queers, the corner of the internet where I give you tons of suggestions on what queer books and queer content to read. And today I'm joined by a very special guest whom I hope will join us many more times. This is Hugo. He was adopted a week ago now. My boyfriend and I adopted him from a cat shelter. I swear he loves me. He's just not a big fan of staying in my lap at times. But he's just gonna be around because he's a very sociable cat and he loves being around. He's just looking at me like, "What are you? Why are you talking to yourself, Mama?" But yeah, he just loves being around me and my boyfriend. So all right, then this is what we're doing. Move. Okay, so the reason I'm here today is to give you some recommendations for this month of October. These are spooky book recommendations, and these are all queer. So I hope you enjoy them. There's a few of them, some spookier than others, and me and the floof here are going to do our best to make you want to read them. So let's get into those. So the first book I want to recommend for this spooky season is called Summer Suns by Lee Mandello. This is one of the spookiest books that I've ever read. Please do read the trigger warnings on this one because it's quite intense. It's very well written and it's beautifully written, really. But it is a bit intense in terms of both writing and themes. So check those out. But Summer Sons is basically the story of Eddie and Andrew who grew up together. They were inseparable until Eddie decided to go away for university, and just a few days before Andrew was due to join him, he passes away allegedly by suicide. And things don't really like the math ain't mathing for Andrew, and so when he reaches Nashville as he had planned, he tries to uncover what happened to him. He stays in the same house as Eddie had been in and gets to know the roommates and the roommates' friends and all of that, not to mention the university professors and just the academic environment that Eddie was in. And so that's kind of the story. There's a lot of body horror, there's a lot of intense scenes of possession. So please be careful with those, but it is an excellent read, and it's an excellent read for this month. And then the second book I want to recommend to you is called Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. Aidan Thomas is one of my favorite authors to follow online because he's incredibly funny and very relatable. This is the only young adult novel that I've included on this list, if I'm not mistaken, but it is a really good one. And it's basically about a trans masculine teen who is trying to prove to his family that he should be a witch, so he should be a brujo. In historically speaking, witches were female, but he really wants to prove himself as a male witch, so a brujo instead of a bruja. And when he decides to perform a ritual on his own, when he decides to perform a ritual on his own, things go a little bit awry, let's say, and he's stuck with the wrong ghost. And so, with the help of his friends and his cousin, then he has to make sure that this ghost returns where he's supposed to be. But there's also a bit of a romance, and it's a really great read for this month. The third book I picked is called The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling. This is a debut novel and it's very atmospheric, very thrilling, perfect for the spooky season. It talks about a protagonist who lies about her credentials so that she can get off planet and join this mission so that she can get a very fat paycheck and get on the trail of her mother who disappeared a long time before. But she thinks that she's also getting a very skilled team to keep her safe, to keep her sane, but that's not the case. What she gets is M, who has no qualms using Jira's secrets. I think that's how you pronounce the protagonist's name. To use her secrets to make sure that she behaves properly and that the mission doesn't get derailed. But things start getting weirder and weirder, and there's things that neither M or Jar can really explain, and so they have to find a way to work together and explain what the supernatural things that are happening are. In Private Rites, we are transported into a world where it hasn't stopped raining in so long that people have forgotten what it was like before. And so it's very atmospheric, it's very rainy, it's very damp as a world. And Julia Armfield's writing makes you feel that, and it's uncomfortable, really. And in this world where everything is a bit hazy because of the rain, because of the wind and clouds, the fact that there's water everywhere, and you don't know if your house is going to make it another day or another week, we see three sisters who have not been together since their teenage years or childhood years, and they're brought together in their adult lives as their father dies. And their father was a very powerful and um, renowned architect who had helped the wealthy of the world be safe from this water that keeps on rising. And so they're bound by this magnificent, opulent house that none of them likes, but they're tied to and they're drawn to, and they have to figure out what to do with it. They have to figure out what has happened to their mother years before, and it's all very nebulous. It's all very dark and it's very confusing, and I absolutely loved it. And on top of the spookiness of this novel, I would suggest this to anybody who's liked the non queer Coco Mellor's book, the new one. It's called Blue Sisters. If you've liked the sisterhood part of the dysfunctional sisterhood part of Mellor's book, then this is definitely another one that you will like. Another book I have for you today is called Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. It is also a sci-fi fantasy type of horror. So if you think you're gonna like The Luminous Dead, this is also for you. And in this novel, we're starting with the story of the Atargatis, which was a ship or a submarine that 7 years prior went into the depth of the Mariana Trench to prove that some really ancient creatures still live there. And this was supposed to be a mockumentary, but the crew never survived, it never came back, and so it became some sort of legendary tale. And some called it a hoax, some called it a maritime tragedy. And now a new crew is being assembled to do the exact same thing, except it's not for entertaining. It's not going to be a documentary. For some, it's going to be a validation of a life's work. Some of them have other reasoning, but for our protagonist, it is about finding out what happened to her lost sister 7 years prior. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of horror down there, there's a lot of supernatural things happening, and some things that might have been left better left unburied are actually going to be uncovered and brought to light. So this is also another very spooky read, in my opinion. If you're not near a body of water, do not read these novels set near body of waters. If you're near the ocean, if you're near the sea, I guarantee that it's going to be really hard for you to jump back in. Two more books that I want to recommend are Leech by Hiron Ennis. I think that's how you pronounce their name, but I'm not 100% sure. And this is for all the people, all the queers out there who enjoy horror stories set in psychiatric hospitals or sanitariums, all of those type of horror stories. It's set in an isolated chateau where the Baron's doctor has just passed, and his replacement now needs to find out how that happened, but also how they managed to lose one of the many bodies that the Institute is holding. And the Institute is a medical institute, and it's worked for hundreds of years into shaping people's minds and forming them into doctors. And we figure out early on that these doctors are the only ones that the world has. So they're shaped and formed there and then sent out into the world. And this is made so that they are trained equally, but at the same time they're there to protect the species from apocalyptic horrors that their ancestors have unleashed in the world. But what the Institute doesn't yet know is that there's already a parasite running havoc, basically, in the halls. And so that's basically the story. I don't want to spoil too much. I think this is going to be enjoyable for all the readers out there or the horror moviegoers that um, love settings of hospitals, psychiatric wards, all of that type of horror. And then the last book I want to recommend is called Heart, Haunt, and Havoc by Freydis Moon. Again, hopefully I'm pronouncing the name right. And this is very short compared to the other books. And it is the first of a duology or a series. I haven't read the second one. And it's basically about a transgender exorcist, Colin, who is called to exorcise a house. Um, but it's proven to be a lot more difficult for a couple of reasons. Why? First is distracted by the very handsome man living in the house called Bishop. And then second, he notices immediately that the house seems to be a living beacon for. The last book I want to talk to you about is called Heart, Haunt, and Havoc by Freydis Moon. And this is a very short novel compared to the others, but it was still very enjoyable in my opinion. I read it, I think, last year around this time. I definitely really liked it. And it has, as a protagonist, a transgender exorcist, Colin, who is finding it a bit hard to exorcise this one particular house because it seems to be a living beacon for supernatural creatures. And also, he's getting distracted by the man who lives there, Bishop. And as the story unravels, we see that one of the most permanent living or haunting creatures of the house is a wolf headed spirit. So it's got the body of a human and the head of a wolf. And it seems to appear a lot around Bishop and seems to be very protective of him, but also very, very cruel. And it's not leaving. And so as we move in with the story, we find out more about Bishop, we find out more about the house, and about why Colin can't seem to exercise this particular house. And yeah, I really like this. I think there's a lot of body horror in this one too. There's a lot of trigger warnings. It's very crude, but I think in some aspects, all of the horror stories that I've just recommended to you are actually a little bit crude and they will have some very intense parts. But yeah, so these are the 7 books that I'm recommending to you today. I hope you found one that you like and that you can go and read during the cold season now with a blanket and maybe a kitty keeping you company or your partner and a candle. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!